Hey girls, Tiffany Dawn here, and welcome back to another week of Tuesday Girl Talk. And a few weeks ago, one of you girls wrote me this hauntingly beautiful email that almost made me cry. And you said, "Sometimes I wonder, am I enough? I look in the mirror at my giant nose and crazy pimples and wonder if I'll ever be pretty enough for a guy to like me. I pull in a skirt and realize it's gotten a little too tight and I wonder if I'll ever be skinny enough. I sit up late doing homework and I wonder will I ever be diligent enough to finish my school on time. All these questions and more surround me all day long. Sometimes it's more than a question, but it's a nagging feeling that I know the answer to. I feel like the answer is never." To the girl who wrote this, my heart just goes out to you and I want to give you a huge hug and just let you know how loved you are. And I want to thank you too, because I feel like you just put words to what is in so many of our hearts. And so today I want to talk about that question because I think it's something us girls wonder a lot. Will I ever be enough? So this is something I've actually really been struggling with myself lately. I've often felt like I wasn't good enough, and I've had people tell me that. My ex-boyfriend told me that I wasn't as pretty as his other girlfriends, and I've had even girls tell me that I wasn't as pretty as my friends. And it's funny because before I got married, I felt like I'd finally worked through a lot of my insecurities, and I felt really confident before I got married, and I'd walk in a room and I wouldn't even compare myself to the other girls there. I felt like confident in who I was, not feeling like I was the prettiest, but just like I know who I am and they can be them and I'll be me and it's all good. And then I got together with my husband, and girls, my husband is so wonderful. He tells me I'm beautiful over and over every single day. And yet I still started feeling like, oh my goodness, I care so much what he thinks. Like, what if he thinks I'm not enough? And then I'd see other girls and I'd be like, what if they're a better fit for him than I am? And all these old insecurities that I thought I had worked through came right back onto me. So my poor sweet husband, I've been talking to him about this all the time. Just on the car ride this morning, we drove home from Rhode Island this morning and I was crying and just sharing I just feel like I'm not enough. And so many times it's I misinterpret things that he does and I write this story in my head that's not even true. It's just in my head. Here's an example of what I mean. We were at a Christmas Eve service last year and my husband just keeps looking over to the left and I'm like, who is over there? And so I look over and there's this gorgeous girl over there and I'm like, oh my gosh, if only I was prettier, he would love me enough to just look at me. And I'm just thinking oh, I'm just not enough. And assuming he's just staring at her. So we get out to the car afterwards and I just feel like crying. And I'm like, why were you staring at that girl? And he goes, what girl? I was like, the really pretty girl with blonde hair standing over there. And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. There was a guy that I recognized, but I couldn't remember his name or where I knew him from. So I kept staring at him to try and figure out where he was from. And I was like, you weren't staring at that girl? It was I had in my head, this is what's happening because of my past experiences. I assumed that he was checking out some other chick and would rather be with her than with me because of other guys that I've dated, not because of my husband. And it wasn't even real. It was just in my head. And girls, sometimes we tell ourselves these stories where I'm not good enough because of this. And a lot of times it has nothing to do with us. A lot of times it has everything to do with the other person. Maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe they're trying to put someone else down to make themselves feel better and you just happen to be the person in their path. So I'm asking God to start kind of rewriting my stories, not to change them, but to change my perspective on what happened and realize that what I thought happened may not have actually been accurate. And yeah, there are some times when it's pretty clear. I had a lady tell me one time, you're pretty. I mean, not Krista pretty, who's one of my friends, but you're pretty. And I was like, was that really necessary? Who does that? So stories like that, where it's pretty clearly somebody's telling me I'm not enough, and they've told me this before, so I'm just gonna assume I'm not enough. Those are the stories that I'm asking God to redeem and to write me a new ending for those stories, so that my story doesn't just stop at, she said this and then I thought, I'm not enough. The end. Thanks for reading. I don't want that to be the end of those stories for me. I want God to write me a new ending. One of the ways I've seen that work in my own life is I went through this really bad relationship that I've told you girls about before. And as I walked through healing from that, I got to share my story with girls rescued from human trafficking. And they were on the edge of their seats with tears in their eyes, and we got to talk and I got to hear their stories afterwards. And I was like, God, you redeemed that story. Yeah, it was an awful story that the enemy meant for evil in my life, but God could turn anything around for good. And that's the way I want God to redeem and write new endings to these stories for me. So the ones that I've been working through recently, I don't have the new endings for them yet. So something that I'm starting to do is I'm about to schedule an appointment with a counselor because I can't walk through this by myself anymore. I don't know which stories are real and which ones are in my head. I don't know how to deal with them. And girls, we need people who can help us. We need to find people that we can talk to, who we trust, who are older and wiser than us. Another thing I'm starting to do is exercise more regularly. Not to lose weight or anything like that, but just because our brains produce different chemicals and hormones when we work out, and so it helps us feel better about ourselves. And so if I'm just sitting around freelance writing and traveling and editing YouTube videos, all of which I love, if I'm just sitting there doing that, then I'm not getting that feel really good about yourself brain chemical release from working out. Another thing I'm starting to do is just try to be more thankful. And I tend to have these obsessive thoughts. Like, do you ever just like lay in bed at night and you're like obsessing about something like, oh, why did I do that today? I'm such an idiot. Like, what was I thinking? I do that like all the time. So I have these obsessive thoughts, and I've never even realized I had them because they felt so normal. I just figured like that was life, but it doesn't have to be. Instead, I'm trying to refocus my obsessive thoughts so that I'm obsessing on thankfulness. And that leaves a whole lot less room for insecurity when you're filling your mind with thankfulness. And here's the thing, I could stand here and I could be like, you are enough. But I know from experience, I don't always feel it and I don't always believe it. So first of all, next week, we're gonna have a whole video just about practical ways to help us believe the things that we know are true. But here's the thing I wanna tell you that I've been learning, and that is the beauty of Christ in me is more than enough. I was reading this book by Corrie ten Boom. She was a survivor of Nazi concentration camps during World War II. Her sister died in the camp. And so Corrie gets out of the camp after the war, miraculously alive, and she's traveling around the world sharing her story of forgiveness. After one of her events, this guy walks up and he's like, I'm one of the guards who was responsible for your sister's death. Would you forgive me? Corrie wrote that she looked at him and there was nothing in her that wanted to forgive this man. And then she remembered that she had Christ in her, and he was more than enough. And girls, like, we are weak because we're human. Like, we're imperfect, we're inadequate, we don't have it all together, we have cracks. It's a part of being human. And so every time you wonder, am I enough? Remember that Christ in you is, and that your cracks are just an opportunity for Christ in you to shine out of your heart. I love you girls, and I hope you have an awesome week. And as always, hit subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, or comment below. I love hearing from you. And I know a lot of the things we talk about on this channel are easier said than done. So next week, we're going to talk about some really practical things you can do to help you remember that you're loved by God and live as a daughter of the King in everyday life. Love you girls. See you then. Bye.